Tonight, we have a wide variety of PAs that are joining us here. I'm Vicki Beloy, and I am chair of the membership committee. Please welcome to all the PA students, new grads, and experienced PAs that are here with us. For the students, this may be preparing your first job application and getting ready for landing your dream job. For new grads, you may be on the hunt to score the perfect opportunity. And for experienced PAs, you may need just to tie up that application package to move on to a new adventure. No matter what you're looking for, we are pleased to have our guest speaker tonight here, Rachel Waldman, who's going to go over some tips and tricks of putting together the best resume package for you when you're applying for those new jobs. Before I let Rachel take over, I'm going to go over a few things. So first, tonight, I want to remind all attendees to remain on mute for the primary portion of this talk. There will be time at the end to answer questions. If you have a question as we're navigating through the talk, please place it in the chat. This will allow us to record the question and then address it accordingly. Tonight's session will be recorded, so that way CAPA members attending this can go back and review the presentation. Additionally, there will be a time for other questions at the end as well. There will be a survey posted in the chat for the event. I'd love it if you could take a few moments to go through that and answer that to give feedback on our presentation tonight. I'm going to take a couple minutes to talk about the current Colorado job market, and then I'll hand it over to Rachel. So as many of you are aware, the Colorado job market is very competitive. There are numerous PAs and NPs in the state that are applying for jobs. And the Colorado Academy of PAs is working on legislation to reduce barriers specifically to PA practice. If you're on the job hunt tonight and joining us, Colorado Academy of PAs has put forward a legislative bill, House Bill 22-1095, which will directly impact you. If you've not heard of this bill before, or you'd like to learn more about it, I encourage you to attend one of our CAPA chats, which will go over the legislative bill in more detail and discuss ways that you can help with getting this legislation passed in Colorado to reduce these job barriers. Now, a bit more onto the Colorado job market. So there are private practice entities within the state of Colorado, but there are also a few major medical healthcare systems that employ PAs. And these include Centura, UC Health, SCL Health, soon to be Intermountain Healthcare, Denver Health, and Health One. And these healthcare entities, they usually have a large HR department that first is screening your resume. It's really important that your resume stands out above the crowd and is easy to read and concise. And that's where tonight's information really comes into handy. There's also 4 PA schools here in Colorado. There's Colorado Mesa, Red Rocks PA program, Rocky Vista, and the University of Colorado. So if you're looking for more academia type jobs, there's a variety out there for you. And PAs work in all different demographic areas across the state. We've got PAs in urban, rural, and suburban areas. So there really is a variety of different locations that you can work in, major health systems that you can work in, and then again, those private practice areas. Now, when you're in search for jobs, where do you go? So the Colorado Academy of PAs actually has a career center on their website. If you haven't visited this before, you can go onto the top bar of the Colorado Academy of PAs website and go and click resources. Scroll down to Career Center and that job search board will pop up. There are new jobs being posted there all the time. Other places to look are the American Academy of PAs website. There you'll find a variety of different jobs across the country and in here in Colorado. And if it's academia that you're more interested in, you can check out the Physician Assistant Education Association job board for more information there. So with that, let's figure out how to put together our best application package. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rachel Waldman. Rachel is a practicing physician assistant specializing in non-pharmacological and interventional spine and surgical pain management in Washington State. She's also president of the Waldman Consulting Group and provides editing and coaching services to high-achieving professionals nationwide. Her and her team have reviewed and edited more than 100 PA resumes in 2021. And she's here tonight to share some of these tips and tools that will help you put together your best application package and your best foot forward in today's competitive job market. A quick disclaimer, Waldman Consulting Group is independent from the Colorado Academy of PAs and therefore is not endorsed. Content is property of Waldman Consulting Group and not directly that of the Colorado Academy of PAs. And so with that, I'll go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Rachel.
Okay, can everyone see me and hear me? All right, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here with you guys tonight and to share my experience with resume writing and the job search. Like Vicki said, this is something that my team and I do on a fairly constant basis in addition to my clinical practice. And so I look at resumes all of the time. And with that experience, I can tell you that resumes are an incredibly underemphasized aspect of career development. And I don't think that's specific to PAs. I think that's very common in this level of professional world. You know, we invest in our education and spend years and years and years learning how to do what it is that we do, but then almost no time actually learning how to present that out to the world. And if you don't have a word of mouth type job situation connection, you can really kind of disadvantage yourself without really meaning to. So the resume is just a really key part of our career arsenal and getting where we want to go. So that's why I love doing this. I love helping other professionals get where they belong and achieve the way that they to their best potential. And that's what the resume is really for. So tonight, this is what we're going to aim to cover. Looks kind of like a lot, but this is what's essential to understand. First, we're going to do the basics. We're going to cover what's the difference between a resume and a CV. We're going to talk about the parts of the resume, and we're going to understand what it's for and what it should look like. We're going to do some technical review of software systems that resumes are processed through in the job application. And we're going to briefly talk about cover letters and interviewing there at the very end, but we're going to focus tonight on the resume. And we'll do questions at the end. So if you have questions that come up to your mind, you think you can put them in the chat on the side, and then we'll get to as many as we can when we finish here in about 30 minutes or so. So this is the main point. Your resume can change your life. I see resumes all the time from PAs that would just astound you what they've achieved. They've been in advanced, top of license positions for a decade or more, and they have a resume that is just incomplete, out of date, doesn't sell it at all. And when you take that and you turn it into what it ought to be, that person is going to have a very, very different set of opportunities in front of them moving forward. So whether you're a new grad or you've been in practice for 10 years, the resume is a really important tool. So let's just cover some basic terminology, resume versus CV. I get asked this all the time. It's a really simple answer. So a resume is what we use as PAs. It's a concise picture of your skills and experience as they pertain to one specific target role. The length is usually about 1 to 2 pages, depending on where you are in your career and exactly what industry you're in. 99% of the PAs that I work with should have a 2-page resume, not more, not less. It should be a comfortably filled 2 pages. There's no reason for more, and less is, I don't think, adequate. The CV, on the other hand, means course of life, and that's basically what it is it's everything. And this is what's used in professional and academic realms, like research or like scientific industry, and it's just going to be a list essentially of your credentials, your publications, the studies you've worked on, and they can be incredibly long. A friend of mine at Hopkins, his resume is like 36 pages long, and I want nothing to do with it. And you don't need someone to help. You don't really need to think too much about your resume or your CV when you're doing a CV, because it's just basically a list. Whereas the resume really needs to be packaged. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But one thing to know is that here in the States, people use resume and CV interchangeably. Just, I'll even do it. To talk about a CV, I'll say CV when I mean resume, or I'll say resume when I'm talking about a CV. And you, as the professional, should just be aware that your application materials, unless you're in academia and you're publishing and involved in research, your application materials will be in a technically resume format. And I can clarify that more in the end if anybody is still unclear. So basically, we got to look at the resume as a marketing tool. And this can be, I found, kind of a mental leap for people to make that aren't used to thinking of it this way. It's not your autobiography. It shouldn't be everything you've ever done and everywhere you've ever been and every GPA you've ever had or test you've passed. It is really a concise message to your audience. And the audience is the hiring committee or the HR person or the supervising physician or whoever's going to be receiving that resume from you. They're your target audience, and your job is to sell the product. And the product is your professional capability. So do you guys remember Mad Men? There's a million ways to sell any given product, right? And you don't want to bury the lead, and you want to make sure that you're telling them exactly what it is that they need to know, and exactly what it is that you want them to know. If you did a volunteer trip with the Girl Scouts in 1989 and someone twisted their ankle and you took care of them, you don't need that's cool, but it doesn't need to be on your resume. Certainly wouldn't need to be at the top of the resume. And that's kind of an extreme example, but those are the kind of micro decisions that you'll be making throughout your resume about what to include, what not to include, and where to include it. Where does it fall on the page? Because all of that is going to matter. All of that is going to affect how your audience perceives what they're looking at. So it's a marketing tool. It's not an essay. It's not an autobiography. So this is just an example of the way you can formulate a message to tell a story in a different way, a more effective way, arguably. And that's kind of the point, right? You're telling the story of yourself as a professional. And if you had 50 different people write your resume, you'd have 50 different resumes, but it's all about you and the facts are all the same. So you need to, think creatively and think strategically about each of those tiny decisions on the page, line by line. So here's just another kind of example of how you can tell the exact same story with a different tone or a different emphasis. And this is obviously visual, but the resume does that with words and visually as well, with the placement of the text on the page, like you'll see. So here's an example of telling the same story in two different ways. So the first example, I'll read these for you. The purpose of this letter is to express my interest in the neurology physician assistant job posting with the Veterans Health Administration. I'm a certified physician assistant, board certified through the NCCPA, and I hold a valid DEA license. I'm also ACLS certified. I've worked in multiple areas of medicine and constantly expanding my skill set since graduating from PA school in 2019. Okay, so all true, all accurate, all impressive. And then the exact, and this was from a real resume client, by the way. This is what they came to me with on their resume. And then you just retell the story, spin it slightly differently. And as a physician assistant with 3 years of diverse clinical experience, I am pleased to advance my interest in the physician assistant neurology opportunity with the VA Medical Center. Now, I would argue that you've told the story much more clearly, much more concisely in the example on the right, and you've used less real estate on the page. Same story. And what you're trying to do is, really the resume has only one goal, and that is to inspire an interview. So you want to give whoever's reading your resume a really fast sense of who you are professionally and what you can achieve. And the word sense is important there because you want them to have a feeling of who you are, really kind of get it across quickly. And that way, if they keep reading your resume after they've glanced at it, you're only gonna sell yourself further. You're not gonna talk them out of interviewing you, but they should be able to know if they want to interview you within like a few seconds. And I actually call that the 20-second test. They should know 20 seconds glancing at your resume. The really, really crucial information should stand out, should jump off the page, should come first so that they know that you're a qualified candidate. So we're going to talk a little bit about the visual side of it. PA resumes should be pretty simple, clean layout, undistracting fonts. The information should be really easy to find. The organization of the document should be super, super clear to anybody just glancing at it. And then as far as the look of the page, I call it the squint test. I've also heard other people call it the quadrant test, where if you just look at this example on the screen on the right here, and if you just squint your eyes enough so that you can't make out any of the words, but you can still see the shapes and sort of colors, the page looks pretty balanced, right? You don't have like a bunch of white space down on one corner and a bunch of dense text on another side, or you can divide the page into 4 quadrants, and each of the 4 quadrants should have about the same amount of stuff in them. And that's just helps the human eye to be more willing to stay on the page and to be able to process the information that's there. You can use a little bit of color. I usually do when I'm writing resumes for PAs, but not much. It'll just be your black and white, and then maybe one other color, like similar to this example, like a conservative blue or gray, or not doing anything super flashy. And whatever alignment pattern you come up with, stick to it. Make sure it's extremely consistent throughout the entire resume. So on this one, you've got, I don't know if you guys can you guys see my pointer? Can somebody tell me if you see my pointer here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So you can see here the dates are aligned on the right and your position titles here on the left. You don't have to do it that way. There's lots of different ways of doing it, but whatever you do decide, just keep it that way and make sure that the alignment matches up, and that'll be the same on the second page. That way, it's just the information is really clear. So here's just some examples of things you pretty much don't want to do. PA resumes, keep it simple, elegant, minimal, modern looking. Not like that. What's wrong with this resume? It is entirely too busy, entirely too dense, way too many words on that page. I do not want to look at it. I don't know even what I'm looking at on first glance, and then certainly doesn't pass the quadrant test. Like the left half and the top left quadrant are much heavier than down here. It just doesn't look good. So that's a no from me. So let's go into just the nuts and bolts, what's actually gonna need to be in your resume and what doesn't need to be in your resume. And some of this is pretty obvious and you've got, you know about it, but there might be some things that, there's probably some things that you didn't, that you weren't aware of, because I see these kinds of mistakes every day. So demographics, there's more decision-making in this simple section than you might think. We now have to worry about whether or not we want to use assistant or associate. We could debate that for the rest of the presentation tonight if you want, but it's a personal choice at this point. I think, given that it's not a clinical scenario, you're not, using your resume to practice medicine, it is, I think, acceptable to use the term associate if you feel strongly about that. I recommend against it simply because of lack of familiarity. Not everybody knows what's going on in our industry, and job postings that will accept PAs are going to list the job as a physician assistant job. So you want it to match. Nicknames, that's also kind of interesting question. If if you go by something completely different than your given name, it can be okay to include it. Like if you've been a PA in your community for 10 years and everybody knows you as, something other than your first name, and your first name has some kind of brand recognition to it, you might want to include it maybe in quotations, in addition to your given name that would be, matched under your personnel file for credentialing purposes. Middle initial, I generally say don't include it unless there's a reason to include it. If you use your middle name, then you might use your first initial and your middle name, but generally a middle initial I find visually distracting, and every inch of your resume page, it's valuable real estate. So I wouldn't use it for anything that isn't important or persuasive. So your contact information has to be there. You don't need to indicate the category, because everyone at this point can recognize what an email address is and what a phone number is without saying email address and phone number. So just put the facts in a subtle, non-distracting way. It's just there for someone who might need to see it, but it's not the headline. If you want to, for visual appeal, to use some of these little icons, you can. I do sometimes for like, marketing executives or people in different fields, but you can. There's nothing wrong with using a small icon. Headshots for PAs, generally no, like almost always no, because it just opens a can of worms for all sorts of reasons. And the exception to that would be if you're applying for something in a specialty where appearance matters more so than others, like plastic surgery, possibly, aesthetic dermatology, possibly. You just have to use your judgment. But for general medicine, PAs should not use headshots, and that's true for most industries at this point. The human brain, we all know, we have all sorts of unconscious bias and whatnot. So you don't want to open yourself up to judgment if you don't have to. So generally no headshots. The next, after your demographics, comes your overview. And this used to be called objective. You guys probably remember that. We don't do that anymore. Everyone has the same objective. You're on a resume. We don't need to say that that you want to get a new job. That does not need to be there. But what we do want is an overview section. This is like the cliff notes of your resume, or like the executive summary. So a busy hiring manager, recruiter, or whoever is looking at your resume, this is a courtesy to them. You're going to give them like 2 sentences so that they don't have to read any more of your resume. They've already decided if they should interview you or not. So you're going to basically say where you're licensed, something basic about what your practice experience is, and the specialty maybe that you're targeting. If you're a new grad, then you just describe what your something about your clinical rotations, or your success as a student, or your involvement in the community and where you're licensed. And that's it. It should just be everything that they really need to know right at the top. Oh yeah, and don't be vague. Please avoid making vague statements about that really say nothing and communicate nothing. Like hardworking PA, experienced in practicing medicine with excellent communication skills, looking for a new full-time position. It doesn't tell me anything about you. Like if you think back to the slide about the Heinz ketchup, you know, like I want to know exactly what and who you are in that overview section. And this is just so, it couldn't be any more general, honestly. Hardworking PA, no, we got to do better than that. Okay, after the overview, at the top should be your certifications. A lot of PAs will go straight to, they'll do like a objective section, and then they'll do education. And unless you're coming from a program, unless you're a new grad and you're coming from a program that has like massive brand recognition, Ivy League, something really special about your program, and you really want to highlight it right at the top, everyone else, the next section should be certifications, because you want to tell the employer where you're licensed. And if you're a new grad and your license is pending, that's cool. Just list you just give the date as expected, whatever month, or application in progress, or so on. You just need to have it checked off the list that you've got the certifications and that they're not going to have to worry about that. A lot of PAs will actually put their license numbers on the resume. I advise against that. Your NPI number is public information. No one needs your DEA license. That shouldn't just be, floating out and about. Same with your medical license number. That's not relevant to the resume, because if they decide to interview you and hire you, that's all going to go through credentials, and that's not going to have any impact on whether or not they decide to interview you, which once again is the purpose of the resume, is to win an interview. So ask yourself that with everything you write. Is it worth the real estate? Is it going to help me get an interview? And license numbers are not going to do that. It just takes up space. And careful with acronyms too. There are certain acronyms that are pretty universal in our world and others that are less so. So just, use your judgment. I put this example together. These are the ones that I think are pretty universal. Others, if you have them and they're not on here, they ask yourself how universal they really are. And then the next section is going to be employment. We're going to go straight into work experience, because that's really what the employer is going to want to know is, what can you do? What have you done before? What are you ready for? What am I getting when you hit the ground? And a lot of, hang on, I got to move this window a little bit so you can see. So a lot of PAs do this mistake where they list the center, the clinic, or the hospital, wherever, first. It'll say like, Denver Health Family Care, Denver, Colorado, primary care, and then physician assistant. And that's completely backwards, because you want to lead with yourself. You want to lead with your role and your achievement and what you're doing. So the very first thing should be physician assistant, and then the specialty, and then the name of the practice. An exception could be, once again, with that brand recognition, if you're at Johns Hopkins or Sloan Kettering or something with big brand recognition, you could debate that decision, but it is something that you should consider carefully and make sure that the ordering of those words and where you choose to bold or not bold is done intentionally. And then when you're going to go into your bullet points, where you're going to describe your work experience, this is again where PAs tend to get lost, and they forget about describing the setting, the community, the patient population, and exactly what it is that you've achieved or done in that particular role. And instead, what I always see almost, oh, so often, it's this like same role. This is the same role as on the last slide, right? So Denver Health Family Care, which I made up to protect the innocent. But the actual verbiage here is real. This came from a real client a while back. This is what they wrote. Primary care responsible for diagnosing and treating a wide range of chronic and acute illnesses, ordering and interpreting labs, providing referrals, maintaining documentation. And that's just a description of a PA. It's not at all what they did. You know, what they were doing was serving a panel of 600 culturally, socioeconomically diverse patients with a focus on young adult and adolescent medicine, you know, and then, you know, their comfort level with managing patient care independently or collaboratively. And just, this is not persuasive. It's not going to convince someone to give you an interview or give them a realistic sense of who they would be inviting to interview. So that's what you're trying to do with each employment section, each section of your employment background. I already sort of mentioned the education bit, but again, this is kind of at this point in a PA's career. You know, a lot of us are second career PAs, even first career new grad PAs. Your master's degree educated, you have the clinical skill set to save lives. The education is sort of assumed at this point. So you need to have it there because it's essential, but it shouldn't be right at the top. Like, this isn't the highlight anymore. The highlight is your experience. And this is just keep it short and sweet. If you did something really cool, like you know, a thesis or a special attribute of the program that is relevant to the job you're applying to, you can include it. But if like you did your thesis on, you know, novel anticoagulants in AFib, but you're applying for a OBGYN or a dermatology position, it's not relevant. So don't include it because you're wasting real estate. If you're a new grad, you can include your student rotations, but otherwise, after you've had that first new job as a PA, your first job as a PA, those rotations disappear unless, again, it was something unique or special or extended and relevant to the job that you're applying for. Another very, very underutilized section of the PA resume is the CME section. You know, we tend to, I think we all as PAs, or most of us, really just want to do really well for our patients. You know, we just want to go to work and do the best that we can and know as much as we can and you know, just really use our CMEs to be better tomorrow in clinic. And that's great, but we should also at the same time be thinking more towards the future of where we want our careers to go. So using your CMEs strategically to build your resume, I think is something that is just so overlooked. Like this becomes really important for PAs who are switching specialties or trying to switch specialties. You know, like I had, she'd been a urology PA for 5 or 6 years right out of school and really just wanted to go into dermatology. But obviously there was nothing in urology that was directly related, but she was able to build a dermatology resume by using the CME section. She had joined the Dermatology Association and they had some modules, some education modules that she knocked out, and we like bullet pointed them down the CME section. So suddenly she had this really hefty resume with a ton of dermatology education. And that's important. That can really give you a leg up on where you want to go. So just thinking about where you might want to be in 3 to 5 years when you're choosing your CME topics and conferences. But it's not worth putting anything that's like less than 5 credits or something, don't list your up-to-date article reading. Just list the substantial ones, like 5 hours or more, ideally conferences. But there's a lot of good online sources where you can earn a lot of CME in a lot of different areas pretty easily if you're looking. And then depending on who you are and your background, there are other optional sections that won't apply to everybody. These are a few, and there are more, but just to give you an example to be, thinking about yourself and your background and how you're going to organize it on the page so that the reader gets a feel for who you are. Don't include your resume, your references. Never include your references on the resume. Don't give them until they've been requested. Reasons why: A, real estate on your 2-page resume. You don't want to waste a bunch of space if they're not going to call your references if they're not going to interview you. Secondly, it's just sort of impolite, I think, to list your references if you don't know if they may or may not call your references. You should have the chance to warn your colleagues that they might get a call from XYZ hospital. Hey, I applied for this job. They called me for an interview. It went well. I'm interested. They asked for references. I gave them your name. So if they call, please look out for it, as opposed to just if you're applying to 18 different jobs in all these different hospitals and you're just like sending it out. You're sending your references, personal information out into the world over and over. So it's just sort of poor etiquette. I always end the resume with that little sentence: references available upon request. You're not saying anything, but it's one line, and I like it because I think it closes the document. So the reader knows, okay, that's it. I've reached the end, and it's just a nice closure, I think, but optional. Okay. Let's switch into talking about the technical aspects of applying for jobs. That feeling where you fill out the online application for whatever Kaiser or whatever hospital system you're with, and you fill in all your information and you cut and paste and select the dates and upload your resume, and then you click submit, and then it just goes into outer space and it never comes back and you don't know what happened. That is what we're talking about here. This is called ATS, or applicant tracking software. And most big organizations, hospital, medical groups are going to use some form of ATS. And what it is really a filter. It's just going to take all the applications that come in, and it's just going to filter them based on the criteria for that position. And so there's a lot of ways to get through it or not get through it. And a lot of really qualified applicants are going to not get through it if it doesn't, if the formatting and the content is not compatible with the way the software reads and interprets data. So I'm going to go through it's a big topic. We could do a whole session just on this. So I'm just going to hit the high points that you should be aware of. And, you can look this up too and read about it online. And you should if you're really seriously on the job hunt. But these are just the big do's and don'ts here. So as you're going through, be aware of, I call them knockout questions. It'll give you a yes or a no. Are you eligible to work in the United States? If you say no, that you're knocked out. They're not going to interview someone who's not eligible to work in the United States. Or have you, do you have any pending lawsuits against your license or something? Yes, no. But there can be more subtle ones too. So do you have at least 3 years of experience in orthopedics? But you say that's a question, but you have 2 years and 8 months of experience in orthopedics. You've got to be able to identify that that's a knockout question. And it can feel like you're being asked to tell the truth or lie. And it's tricky. I mean, we could also talk about this forever, just the ethics of it and everything. But if you know that it's likely to be a knockout question, you know, you can ask yourself, like, you know, do I want to knock myself out because of 3 months, criteria, or not? There are some statistics that are out there comparing men and women in the workplace, and I just think it's interesting. I read recently that men are like 30-something% more likely to apply for positions for which they don't actually meet all of the listed criteria. They'll still give it a go a lot more often than women will, apparently, statistically. So, you know, just keep that in mind. You know, just because you have 2 years of experience in the job posting, you know, lists 3, you know, you could still be the perfect one for the job. You just have to kind of go with what you feel comfortable with. But knowing that it could be a knockout question. Some systems will actually like take all of the applicants and process them through the filters, and then they'll come out ranked. You know, so somebody's number 1 and somebody's number 100, and it's based on how well the software thinks that you match to the job description. And that's where you'll start thinking about including keywords from the job listing in your actual resume. Like when you're describing your work experience, using words from the job description. Like if they list a procedure that they want you to have experience with, you know, use that procedure in the way that they wrote it, you know. So if they used an acronym, use the acronym. If they don't, you know, write it the way they put it in the job description. And hiring managers can also search the application pool using a keyword. So like intubation, you know, that could be a keyword. They want to find somebody who's top of license, ER provider, who's, you know, doing high level resuscitation, and they'll punch it in. And if it's not in the resume, then your resume just kind of falls out of the pile. Making sure that you're using really simple formatting and numerical dates so that the systems can calculate, because they'll spit out like how many years you've been a PA, or how many years of whatever specialty, in kind of like a like reformatted sort of like list form that will then be processed and presented and, you know, interpreted by hiring managers. Use traditional section titles too, because they're going to pick up on, you know, work experience or education, you know. So don't say schooling or anything weird. Don't get too creative. Don't use any charts or graphics. And pay attention to, if you're applying through a portal type like that, if they ask for a PDF, give them a PDF. If they ask for a Word doc, give them a Word doc. Y'all know formatting stays more true in a PDF document than a Word doc. But if they ask for a Word doc, give them a Word doc, because the PDF might not even get past the, you know, the first level of filtering. And then last point on the ATS stuff is there is this idea of using whiteout text. And this is where you will actually copy and paste from the job listing what they're looking for, copy it, paste it directly onto your resume document in white, so that it does not appear on the page to a human eyeball, but it can get seen by the ATS. It's kind of like a hacking trend that's going on. I don't really have any data on how effective that may or may not be, but it's just something I wanted you guys to be aware of. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the resume overall. I'm sure you guys have questions, but I did want to take a minute and at least touch on the rest of the application package, because it's not just the resume. Cover letters for sure are important. If the application gives you the option to submit a cover letter, you should definitely submit a cover letter. It's another opportunity for you to introduce yourself and tell them what you're about and what you can do and why you're right for that position. So don't miss that opportunity. But don't overdo it either. The resume has to be concise and clear and get your point across really fast, and so does the cover letter. So this one here, this isn't a PA letter, but you can see just from like stepping back and looking at it that it fits really comfortably on the page. It's just like no more than 3 to 4 paragraphs. It doesn't look like it's going to be hard to read. The tone should be very simple and clear. And you're just going to highlight what's relevant to the target position. That's it. You're not gonna try to summarize your resume or put it into paragraph form. You're basically just going to be very polite and very professional and demonstrate your ability to do that and to communicate in that manner by just introducing yourself, giving a few of the highlights that should prompt someone to want to interview you for whatever position it is, and then thank them for their time. And that's it. Don't overthink it. But don't miss that opportunity if you have the chance, just because it can be you've already worked so hard on your resume and now you don't really feel like writing a cover letter, and you should write a different one for each target position that you might have. But it's worth it. It really is. And then, so that's as much as I think we can do with cover letters in the time that we have, because I'm already getting close to my time here. But just quickly, interviewing. So you've done like a great resume and you really put your best foot forward and you've been invited to interview. So, you don't want to blow it, right? So how do you do really well in an interview? Be prepared. Know about what you're walking into. You want to know about as much about the practice as you possibly can. I think it's a good idea too, if you're really on the job hunt, apply to things that you'll get interviewed for, even if that's not the job you want. It's okay to do that a little bit and to go out and see what's out there. A, you never know. And B, it's great to get practice. Practice doesn't make perfect, but practice definitely makes improvement. So practice every opportunity you can. I give mock interviews to clients all the time. That's an option. And just make sure you're ready. Make sure that you're feeling ready. Be early. Schedule it for a time that you have plenty of cushion so that you're not rushing to it and you're not rushing out, so that you're not flustered. And dress yourself. What should I wear to the interview? I mean, the basics, but wear something that you feel really good in, feel comfortable. Because if you don't, you're not, all of that can be read on somebody. If you're uncomfortable and you're nervous and you're upset and this is terrible and you're sweating and you're miserable, that comes across. And that's not the kind of person that most people want to, spend more time with. Like, you want to come across like you're enjoying yourself, like you're happy to be there. And that's not easy when you're nervous and when you feel like the stakes are high. But the best way for people to inspire people to like you is if you show that you like them. If you show that you're enjoying their company and that you're comfortable in yourself, that's going to be a more pleasant interaction that they're going to be more inclined to want to repeat. So try to enjoy yourself, even, just try. And if you're really nervous, I think a great exercise for PAs is to just like switch gears and act like you're in the room with the patient. Because when you've been a PA for a while, or even if you're a new grad and you've gone through clinicals, like there's literally like nothing that a patient could say to me that would really like throw me in the moment. You know, we've all heard the like the craziest stuff, and you just you it you don't let it throw you off your game in the moment. You know, you might like go home and be like, oh my God, this crazy thing happened, you know, but in the moment, you're going to stay poised. You're going to stay in control of yourself. You're going to stay in control of your face, right? No matter what nonsense is being said. And that's great for like really high stakes interviews too, where they'll do these like, you know, crazy questions. A friend of mine is works for Amazon, and she's part of their like executive hiring team in some department, and she actually has the role of they call her the bar raiser in the interviews, and her job is to basically just come into the interview and come prepared with really crazy questions to just try to throw people off and see not if they can get the answer to a crazy question right, but just to see how they handle stress and unexpected circumstances. And I think for PAs, this can be really, really helpful. Just you're talking to a patient. Oh, okay. That's very interesting, Mrs. Smith, you know, like, and then move on. So that's about time, I think. And as you know, I do, you know, read and write and edit resumes professionally, and people ask me, well, you know, should I entertain the idea of getting my resume professionally written? And, you know, I think it depends. If you are not someone who has had the experience of reading a lot of resumes recently, then it might be something to consider getting at least some feedback from someone who has or who is reading a lot of resumes currently. And be very cautious of the I call them big box companies with low prices that offer resume writing services online. You know, if you just Google resume writing, you'll see a bunch of different companies doing this. This one on the right, I actually just added this to my slide deck last week because I had a PA client who had paid a company to do her resume, and she'd paid a lot of money, and this is what she got. And I couldn't believe it. And they wouldn't work with her or anything. Like, this is just nonsense. You can read it and you can tell right away that whoever wrote it doesn't know anything about medicine or what PAs do. Like, what does it say? Switch wounds. Interview and examine patients to determine a diagnosis. Yep, yeah, we do that. So, you know, just verify claims of industry specific experience. You know, if they say that they have experience in all industries, you know, I would be pretty skeptical of that because nobody has experience in everything. And also, just if you're going into a deal with a resume writer, you should have the right to final approval. You shouldn't be paying. You shouldn't have to pay for it unless you're happy with it. This client, she had paid up front, and then like they wouldn't edit, they wouldn't do a revision with her or anything. It was a disaster. So just, you know, trust but verify. And then at the end of the day, you should the deliverables should include the original Word file, because it's your resume, and you should be, you know, constantly updating it, constantly maintaining it, keeping it like a living document. When you're doing your CME courses, just, you know, as a matter of habit, just adding them into your document. That way, whenever you want to apply for a position, it's kind of ready to go, and you're not scrambling at the last minute, you know, trying to get it done in a hurry when the stakes are high. And need I say more? Make sure you proofread your resume, have someone else proofread it again. There's nothing worse. It's a 2-page document. There's no reason it shouldn't be perfect. It helps to step back from it for a while. I'll usually, when I finish a resume, I'll usually just ignore it for 24 hours and then come back to it to proofread. because you can kind of get that tunnel vision. Something I like to do is print it out on paper and then use another piece of paper, a blank piece of paper, to cover up all of it except for the line that I'm reading. And I just go, really, really, really slowly along each line and just catch anything that's, capitalized wrong or spelled wrong, or, doesn't make sense with the word syntax or periods in the wrong place. So just don't make any mistakes. Okay, I think that's good. We can go into some questions if people have any. Open it up here.
Rachel, yes, we have a couple of questions that are coming in here now. This is Vicki. So Lauren asked, what's the normal amount of time between when you apply for a job and when you should hear something back from the employer? What would you say is the normal amount of time to wait for that?
God, I wish I had a good answer. I don't think that there really is one. Some positions will just like collect applicants until a certain date and nothing gets looked at until that date. And then all the sorting and the consideration happens, but there's just way too many variables that are possible to really give an accurate answer to that question, because how many positions is that particular hiring manager trying to fill, and how many applicants are there, and how urgent is it to get it filled? And it's too variable. But I mean, I've heard of people getting called back like months after submitting an application, but you don't want to just sit around and wait either. But the follow-up is really important. Once you've submitted the application, you can try to find an answer to that question as it pertains to that specific job you're applying for. Even if it's like a big hospital institution, you can just, sometimes you can Google the HR department for that hospital or practice and just start with a general number and just call and be nice and friendly and let them know that you've applied and that you are looking to follow up, and see if you can get connected to someone directly, like an email address or something that you can send an email. When you do send a follow-up email, one way to get that I think helps to get a personal response is if you say, hey, I've applied to this job and I'm really interested, etc. But end it with a question that is like a simple, concrete question that should be pretty easy for them to answer, but that demonstrates also your interest in the job, to prompt them to respond to you and start a conversation. And that could very easily be that question. You could ask, about their urgency of filling that position and when they expect to, or hoping to have it filled or something like that. And then, you can kind of gauge from there. Does that answer your question? It's kind of strategic.
Is that a good answer for you, Lauren? Let's see here. Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay.
Kind of on follow-up, Kelly had a question regarding if it's appropriate or what your take is on emailing the hiring manager after you submit the resume. You just submit the resume, or do you immediately send a hiring manager the email to show your interest? What's your take on that?
Kind of like what I just said. Yes, you should send a follow-up email. Absolutely should. Okay. I wouldn't do it that same moment. I wouldn't hit submit your application and then send the email. You want to, hopefully you want to time it so that they receive your email a little bit after they've seen your application, to kind of remind them of you and make it easy for them to communicate with you. It's easier to just hit like reply than it is to, initiate that conversation. So you kind of have to use your spidey sense a little bit, and whether you wait a day or two or a week to follow up. But I would say in that range between like 2 days and a week to send that follow-up email.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
A couple other questions here, kind of some of them concerning around applying for jobs, either as a brand new grad or as just about to exit PA school.
Yeah.
And your experience. So, you know, if you don't have any direct experience related to that position, or it's not healthcare related, should you list your rotations on there? And to what degree should you list those rotations?
Yeah, if you're a soon to be new grad or a recent grad and you haven't started your first job, then I think it's entirely appropriate to list your rotations, because that's essentially like your work experience. So you want them to know what you've done, what you've emphasized, what your electives were. Hopefully you've done something medically related prior to PA school, so you will have a work experience section. But other than new grads or about to graduate, don't list your rotations.
Okay. And then after the interview, do you recommend sending a thank you note to the interviewer?
Yeah, I do. The more communication, the better, but it has to be back and forth. You're not going to send an email every day. Like you email them and then they email you and it's a conversation, right? So just like after you send your application, you want to send an email, say, hey, I sent my application, very interested, ask a question. And same with an interview, if you enjoyed the interview, even if you didn't, it's still just polite and good practice to send a thank you email. Because, just remember that when you're on an interview, like you're interviewing them too, right? You're trying to decide where you want to spend like 40 hours a week for potentially like the rest of your career, like it's a really big decision. And so as much as you're, as the interviewee, wondering what they thought of you and if they liked you and if they're, if they want to hire you, they should be wondering too, especially if they want to hire you. They're wondering, well, do they want to come here? Are we going to have to, negotiate, or is she going to accept? That kind of thing. So it's a back and forth. So if you send an encouraging email, the power is not all theirs. You send an email too, expressing your feelings about the role. And again, asking a question, a simple question, a non-threatening question, a non-controversial question, something that's easy for them to answer, but that would be like important for you to know as their new hire, is a great way to just, human nature. Someone asks me a simple question I know the answer to, I'll answer it, right? And now you've opened up a dialogue. So that's what I suggest, just like something super benign, like, what is the target start date, or, something really simple.
And along that line, Rachel, Megan was wondering, it's the email's better than a handwritten thank you note then, because there's a question, or do you think a handwritten note is more personal? Or
I mean, I think a handwritten note is nice for like student rotations for your preceptors, because you have a relationship, right? You've been with them for a month or whatever it is, and a thank you card, in a personalized thank you card like that, I think is appropriate. But honestly, this is just my, my experience and my opinion. There might be people out there who disagree, and I'm happy to have a debate if anybody thinks that thinks that I'm wrong about anything. But I think a personal handwritten thank you note after an interview is kind of creepy. Like, it's just a little too personal for my taste. I think, especially in medicine, I mean, the person who interviewed you is probably a physician with, probably more well, presumably more, I don't know, maybe not, but whatever. You want to keep it professional. You know, I mean, I've been at the same practice for years, and the only handwritten thing I've ever given anyone in my practice is like Christmas cards, you know, but we know each other well. And I think email communication is far more appropriate.
Great, thank you. We have a couple of questions here kind of surrounding timing for application and what to do when you're applying kind of for that first job out of PA school. So Hannah was wondering, you know, when is the appropriate time to start applying for those jobs? You know, how soon is too soon to send out that resume type of thing? And then Audra was wondering, how do you appropriately list your anticipated graduation on your resume? So you haven't taken the pants yet, you haven't graduated yet. How do you word that on the resume?
Yeah, so submitting applications before you've passed pants is probably unlikely to be fruitful. It's not wrong, you can do it, but you know, if you're studying for pants and everything, like you've got to kind of triage where you put your energy. Unless you have a connection or have been invited to submit your resume directly, I personally would just concentrate on studying. There's gonna be some lag time between, you know, getting the news that you passed and getting your license. And I think that's the sweet spot for applying. You know, you can say that, you know, you're certified and that your license in whatever state is in progress and expected, whatever. You know, when you apply for your state license, the board should be able to kind of give you a rough estimate of how long it's going to take to process, you know, and if they say 3 to 6 months, just kind of split the difference and say, you know, expected in 4 months from now, and just put that date on the resume. And if it winds up being, you know, a few weeks sooner or a few weeks later, at that point, it won't really matter. It'll just be like a credentialing issue because you would have already interviewed and accepted the position. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's how you would list it, is expected or anticipated and the date. And an application in progress, you could say, like, you know, Colorado State medical license application in progress, expected March 2022. And that way there's no ambiguity about, you know, whether or not you're going to be eligible for a state license, because first you have to pass the pants. And again, you just got to focus on the pants, probably, unless you're invited personally with a connection.
Wonderful. I think we've addressed most of the questions in the chat. Does anyone have any further questions that they'd like to ask Rachel? Well, wonderful. We are a bit over time. Rachel, we really appreciate you spending some time with us tonight and giving us those tips and tricks.
No problem. I'm happy to be here. I just wanted to thank you guys all for having me and for listening tonight. And I am more than willing to work with anybody. If you'd like some feedback on your resume, my email address is there. I'm offering some special pricing to you guys since you've already been here through the seminar, and you can just reach out to me that way. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you again. And thank you everybody for attending tonight. Have a wonderful evening.